What's going on, boys and girls? Welcome to another video, a new car. This thing is absolutely fat. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but I must say, I really like this thing. So you might remember, last year we built a fairly, we sort of tried to put together the best budget combination of a LS that we could, that was capable of 1,000 horsepower. And what that ended up being was LY6 iron block, brand new LSA crank from GM. It ended up with comp star rods and diamond pistons and just rectangle port heads that had been overhauled. One of our complete OSP warehouse cam kits, and you ended up with ARP head studs and main studs as well. And you end up at the end of the day with a pretty awesome, fairly cheap engine that's capable of 1,000 horsepower, no worries. And we dubbed it the Iron Brock because the owner, his name is Brock. And he was in the running for Young Street Machine of the Year last year. I don't think he ended up winning, but he was obviously in the running for it with this car. He's only a young fella, and this thing is absolutely schmick. I love it. Check it out. What an absolute beauty. So, Brock's from down south of Sydney, so it's a fair trek up to us. So we're super excited that he's chosen for us to be part of this build. We built him his engine for him, and we're obviously just finishing off a few things so that we can tune the car. Everything else was done elsewhere. It's really awesome having it next to the HQ, having them both in here at the same time, because it's a really good juxtaposition. It's a really good example of two of the same era cars done very well, but in very different styles. But nonetheless, both of them done very well. Like even the full double grille, that's not everyone's cup of tea. Not everyone really likes it, but I've got to say, for this car, it suits it down to the ground. This car looks absolutely fat. Airbag all around, super sick wheels. The thing is it's just sick. I freaking love it. So at the moment, we're just going through everything, doing a full check over the car. He just brought it out here with no fluids, nothing in the engine or anything like that. Basically, we built the engine. He wants us to run it in, pretty much finalize the last few things, get it ready for a run it all in for him, and then get onto our tune. So it's all ended up powered by Haltech, so it's a full Haltech ECU setup with IC7 dash, all the berries, so lots of really cool stuff. It's an S480 turbo. We ended up putting the Crocam's 1287 in this car, which is 227, 244 and a 114 lobe separation, which we thought would be a pretty good cam for, a mild, streetable setup that is still going to take, quite a bit of boost and hopefully make a fair bit of horsepower. So the gearbox is not rated for 1,000. The gearbox I think is only rated for about 850. Upon having a look at the car this morning, we've noticed that the converter, it's just the converter from when the car was previously LS3 based and aspirated. It doesn't look like the converter's got any anti-ballooning or anything like that. So it wasn't particularly built for this turbo setup. So that's something we're gonna have to really keep an eye on with this. So it's all gonna be flex fueled and all the rest. And we had hoped that we could maybe break the 1,000 horsepower mark, just to get the number, but then obviously back it back down for the street because the owner doesn't want to drive it around at 1,000 horsepower with a gearbox that's not rated for it, sort of thing. But given the way that converter is, we'll just see what it's happy with. Because this engine was moderately budget, obviously we didn't end up with any sort of Torrington thrust bearing or anything on the crank. And the issue you have is if you start ballooning that converter, it starts to really push on the back of that crank and you start to eat thrust bearings really fast. So not something we want to play with, not something that's worth playing with. 1,000 would be cool just to get the number, but at the end of the day, it's not going to be make or break, do or die sort of thing. So if the converter's not very happy, we'll pull it up wherever it is happy. But yeah, we're really looking forward to this thing. Stoked to be part of the build, stoked to have a name on it. Look at the airbrushing up the side. I'm a huge fan, you guys know that I'm a huge fan of wagons, right? Wagon, long roof, absolutely sick. PanelVan, on the same level. I freaking love a good PanelVan. They're so sick. Big old shaggin' wagon. Yeah. So full 4-link rear end, side pipe. Super sick. So
set fire.
Yeah. Basically just going full over the car, front to back. We've got a fair few, questions for the owner, a few things to sort out. Just making sure we're happy with everything before we start getting into it. But big Willwood brakes. Ooh-wee. What a weapon. What do you reckon, Bo? Yeah, she's mid.
Pretty mid.
I bet you miss working on Hiluxes, don't you?
Hey?
I bet you miss working on LM106 Hiluxes and shit, don't you?
Yep, definitely.
So yeah, airbags all around. When this thing's aired out, it's sick. It's so slammed when it's aired out. It looks fat. Anyway, I'll show you more of it when we get it on the ground, but yeah, such a cool car. Rightio guys, so we are well into day 3 of trying to figure out what the hell's going on with this thing. It's racking our brains. I haven't really been filming much just because we've just had nothing really to say, but we're having some really weird issues. Trying to calibrate the fly-by-wire throttle, and when you calibrate the throttle, it starts with the fans. It's really weird. Do you want to just hit calibrate, Rex? I'll show them what's...
Yeah, ready.
So as that fly-by-wire throttle's trying to calibrate, going fully open and fully closed, it's actually powering the fans as it does it, which is really, really strange. But weirdly enough, because we thought, surely it's got to be something in the car, a short in the car or something that has to do with that fly-by-wire throttle, and it's shorting out the fan relay or something like that. But if we depin DP04 on the ECU plug, which is the fan output, it doesn't do it. So if you just depin DP04 from the ECU plug, it doesn't do that to the fans. So it's a really, really strange issue. We just tried another ECU just to rule out that it wasn't an ECU fault, and the other ECU does the exact same thing. So it doesn't appear to be an ECU fault. It's a really, really weird issue. We're really struggling with it.
Oh well, I think I'm that desperate I might even resort to asking the internet, that is proper desperate. It's just because at the moment, like, it's Easter and it's Easter Saturday, so Haltech's not going to be back until Tuesday. So in the meantime, I don't know, maybe we'll get the rare half decent answer from the internet.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold my breath.
I'm not going to hold my breath, but hey, it's worth a shot, right? But as Max said, the reason that's significant about the DP04 when we depin it from the ECU and it still does it is because our thought was, is there a mixed wire and it's doing something funny further up the chain? But with the DPO depin at the ECU, it doesn't do it, which means that when it's cycling these fans, it's because it is earthing out the DP04 pin. And why it's doing that, I don't know. The calibration process is supposed to be that first part is to test limits, is it should literally just drive the throttle fully open and then drive it fully shut, and then it knows full open, full shut, and then you move on to the rest of the calibration process. But it starts the calibration, it cycles the fans, and then it fails. It starts again, and it just does that 4 or 5 times, and then it fails the calibration and it disables the fly-by-wire. So I've checked, I've pinned it from this. The wiring appears to be correct. It's got 5 volts in, an earth signal earth, not a body earth. It's a signal earth, and it's got the 2 tack wires wired to the fly-by-wire drive pins correctly, and the 2 TPS wires. That's it. So I don't understand what's going on here. And we have tried 2 other throttle bodies besides this one. So we've confirmed, like, surely we couldn't have 3 dodgy throttle bodies. So it doesn't appear to be a throttle body issue. It's definitely not an ECU issue, which that was a bit of Hail Mary anyway. Like, yeah. But at least we know for sure. So yeah, yeah. I'm running out of ideas.
All right, guys. So we finally have got to the bottom of this issue. What a waste of a few days. Very frustrating, but hey, the more you know. So we did talk to Haltech before they shut on Thursday about the issue we were having. One of the main things that Luke from Haltech there told us was you have to ensure that you're supplying 12 volt to pin A26, otherwise they will do weird things like this. Now, everything of the tests we did, it was obvious that pin A26 was getting 12 volts. So we sort of just glossed over that and we'll continue to go on about our day. So we ended up today posting the issue we were having in the Haltech Facebook page, which honestly, actually all the answers we got rarely for asking Facebook were actually all quite good. And one answer was that pin A26, you can't just check the back of the pin or anything while the ignition's on, because it will backfeed from the ECU 12 volts. So that pin will feed out 12 volts while everything's turned on. You have to actually pull the pin out and make sure that it's being fed 12 volts, which it wasn't. So that was the issue. So Rex pulled that out, realized it wasn't getting fed 12 volts, gave it 12 volts, put it all back together, calibrated the throttle, fine. So yeah, now we can move on with our lives.
Well, now I have to work out why that wire doesn't have 12 volt to it.
Yeah.
But at least now I know what I'm looking for. Yeah. Because Luke was saying that it's common because it's pin A26 is listed as the I think the injector. Haltech calls it like the injector 12 volt input or something like that. Very common for people that are trying to set things up and don't want the injectors firing, so they pull that fuse out and they run into heaps of problems like this. But the ECU needs that 12 volt to operate.
Yep.
So. Oh, I can't believe it's cost me 2.5 days of this. Ugh. All right. Now I'll undo all of this nonsense and we'll try again.
Righto guys, so we are still fighting with this thing. It's frustrating. I mean, you know, cars need stuff, that's fine, but it's just time that we hadn't accounted for. We have so much other stuff going on.
Yeah, I can't remember if this is day 3 or I think this is day 4.
Day 4.
This is day 4.
So, you know, cars need stuff, that's fine, but it is just frustrating that we're so busy at the moment, and to like lose this much time on a car that wasn't meant to is going to cost us big time. But what we found, Rex was fueling it up, putting some fresh fuel in it because we've got it all timed. The offset should be right for it to run, but the thing just won't start, and we've been battling that since yesterday afternoon. So we thought we'd try some fresh fuel this morning.
That feels.
And Rex fueled it up and realised that one of these feed lines to the pump is split. And
because it was just leaking out of the middle of the line, fitting dry. Where else can it possibly come from?
So it appears that this bit of fuel line that goes from the tank to the pump is split, which probably is half our problem. If it's aerating the fuel, the pump's drawing a lot of air. It's still getting some pressure, but there's probably still a lot of air in the fuel that might be fighting us a little bit. So there's a few things going on here. So it feels like they're just rubber, not actual PTFE, which is probably not a good thing to start with in a fuel system that's meant to be doing what this is meant to be doing. But anyhow, hey, all you can do is fix stuff. So still just going through fixing stuff. Fixing. So the owner's gunning to try and get to, at the end of this month, the Van Nationals, Street Machine Van Nationals are on down near where he is. So he wanted to get it there, hopefully at the end of this month. But it's just depends how long it's going to freaking take to get all this sorted and get it running on the dyno. Like I said, it's just frustrating that we have so much other stuff to do. We weren't counting on this taking so long. So Rex just pulled the filter open for that line, and that's what came out of it. So
big old chunky boy.
this rubber is just, it's just breaking down. It's
must be fairly old what they're looking for.
So
as far as I know, like any of these manufacturers, Speed Flow, Aeroflow, pretty sure even their rubber.
yeah, it's meant to be rated for fuel. Yeah.
And like for E85, and like this hasn't even had E85 as far as we know. It's just been 98.
Yeah,
so it's kind of strange.
Just old broken down lines is all.
Yeah, it's a little bit concerning though about the others, but
It is. It's not ideal. Definitely not ideal. It's one of those things where you could have a car that runs fine for 20 years, and as soon as you bring it to the dyno, everything's just going to go to shit. It's just what happens. Anyway.
see, that's what they've been doing. Like, what the fuck? Just coils firing randomly just with the ignition on. I don't fucking get it. I'll call Haltech and see if they know why we'd be doing that, because if you check the output states of the coil drives, the ECU doesn't think it's doing it.
So yeah, guys, we're still fighting with. So what's going on just there is just with the key on, nothing else is happening. It's just randomly firing coils. One of the biggest issues we're having at the moment is trying to get consistent spark, consistent firing, so that we can check offset properly. From what we can find from what the offset is, it shouldn't be far enough out that it won't run, but this thing will just not run. But yeah, it's really, really random, the coil firing. So yeah, and it's doing weird stuff like this. So there's still a lot of weird wiring issues that this thing's having. It's a lot of weird stuff it's doing. So we're still fighting with it. We're still chasing problems. Yeah, frustrating. Very frustrating. All right, so I've been talking to Haltech this morning, or trying to talk to Haltech. We just want to ask them basically if they've got any idea of where we'd be looking at as far as this being a wiring issue. But unfortunately, the entire tech support team from Haltech are all on internal training today, so there's literally no one at Haltech today specifically that can help us, so we're gonna have to try again tomorrow. But Rex just deep-pinned trigger 1, or ignition 1 trigger from the ECU. And even with ignition 1 trigger unplugged from the ECU, see the spark plug down there? Hopefully the GoPro's picking that up, but
Trust us when we say that it is sparking randomly.
it's going off tap. It's having a party. So it's not the ECU that's triggering this.
Yeah, which didn't look like it was because I've got all 8 ignition outputs in their state. So the ECU should tell you, like when it's cranking, it says pulsing, blah, 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 and it just says off. So with that, if it was the ECU with that D pin, that should be it. And that fucking plug is going off for some reason.
So there is obviously some external issues going on here. Wiring, obviously, most likely. Yeah.
I don't even know where to start with this now, where to go. Where do we go from here? This is the end of day 4 now. There's so much shit we have to do. I can't. This wasn't meant to take 4 days. I feel really defeated at this point, honestly. I'm so done.
All right. So we think we got to the bottom of it.
Angry.
So with LS coils, each coil has 4 pins. You got your power to the coil, the earth for the coil, you've got the trigger for the coil, and then there is another earth, which is like a signal earth. And you're meant to wire this earth to the signal earth of the ECU, so the ECU has a reference. Or
you can just wire them straight.
Or yeah, you can just wire both earths to the same point if you need to, but ideally you're supposed to have the second earth to the signal earth in the ECU, so it's got a reference for what the coils are doing. But Rex was pinning around, fluffing around, and worked out that the second earth on the coils is open circuit, doesn't go anywhere. So because it's still got the stock LS coil sub harnesses and coil sub harness plugs, so they are all wired to the 1 pin on the sub harness plug. So Rex back pinned that second earth on the sub harness and just earthed it out, and lo and behold, our coils aren't firing with the ignition on anymore, and we're getting some consistent light.
And timing's fucking, it's only probably a couple of degrees out. It's close enough.
Yeah, so that looks like it's been the problem the whole time. So it's actually getting consistent spark.
One problem.
Yeah, one of the problems.
It's probably, hopefully, the final problem.
Fingers crossed. But yeah, we're now getting consistent spark. Can actually check the timing properly. The coils aren't just randomly firing, so...
Because that's what I was thinking before, is like if they're getting power and it's not the ECU that's triggering it, there's like normally when anything does weird shit like that, it's almost always an earth
problem. Yeah.
So I have a feeling what's going on is, yeah, without that other earth hooked up, or wherever that, I don't know, basically it was just maybe oversaturating the coils and just arcing out. I don't know, but doing that has immediately fixed the problem. So
all right.
Okay.
Another problem down. Keep working through it.
I'll put the plugs back in.
Manifold
Try
back
this
on.
again.
See if this thing starts now. After all this.
So bad.
Anyway, it happens. Things get missed. It is what it is. Rightio, so getting it running is step 1, but there's still other issues that we have to try and sort out. We've still got no wideband. Wideband's not working. There's a fuse that keeps on blowing. We've tried a 15, we've tried a 20, and it blew that as well. We're not actually sure what the fuse supplies or what it does. We're thinking it might be the wideband fuse. Maybe that's while we have no wideband, but we're going to try 30 amp fuse in it. If that blows as well, obviously there's a short, there's a problem.
Yeah, I know that fuse supplies the wideband.
Oh, you know it supplies the wideband?
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know what the other pin supplies.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. All right.
That's why, but that's what I was. Yeah. Anyway, it's on mine now.
Yeah, sweet. So we've got a wideband now, so we'll see how long it stays in there for.
And that other one, that other fuse that kept blowing that I just had a shorting wire in, is now seems to be okay. We'll see what happens when we try and start it. Because I think it does supply injectors and coils. I think it's probably gonna fucking pop again.
All right, so we uncovered some more information, figured some more stuff out. So that fuse that keeps blowing is supplying the coil with power, but it's supplying the signal earth wire with power, which is the one that we just had to earth to get the car to run. So you put a fuse in it, and the reason it was blowing is because we had it temporarily earthed. So it's literally just it's just grounded straight to earth. So if we pull that fuse and we don't supply that wire with power to the coil and we earth it, the car runs. But put the fuse in, supply the signal earth of the coils with the power, fires all over the place, will not run, acts like a, so there's something going on here with the wiring. We're gonna have to trace it back and try and figure out what the hell's going on here, but it appears that just the wrong wire is being fed 12 volt. A wire that doesn't need 12 volts being fed 12 volt. I don't know, we're gonna need to just trace it back and have a look. That's a crack.
Along the top.
Cracked radiator as well, just to add to the list of things. Righto, so Rex unpinned that power to the core from the fuse box, ran it to earth, instead earthed it out, and now that fuse doesn't blow, the car runs, and we have a wideband. So happy days. We just got to do that like as a permanent fix, along with a few other permanent fixes, and try and figure out what the hell we're going to do about this radiator. And we've still got to do alternator wiring, still got to wire in the trigger for the trans brake. Still a fair bit to go on at the end of day 4. All right, guys, slowly getting there. Rex welded up this radiator this morning, so hopefully no more leaks. Just started redoing all the boost control lines and stuff, all PTFE. Same with the vacuum reference for the fuel pressure regulator. Change all them out from silicon to PTFE so that we know that's going to be a problem. Now, I've talked to the owner, so he's trying to get this thing down to Van Nationals at the end of the month, and there's going to be a few things that we're not going to get time to sort out. So things like that speed sensor input, because there's not an actual speed driver in the box. We've got an idea for what to do with the cherry sensor using the tail shaft unis as a reference to get a speed input into the ECU for the actual output shaft speed. But for now, we've just got the Haltech GPS speedo unit, which we're just going to wire to the IC7 in the car so that he's got a speedo in the car, so that he can go to Van Nationals at the end of the month. And we're just going to worry about things like that, speed sensor and everything, at a later date. So for now, we're just gunning to get this thing on the dyno and get it tuned, so that he can get it to Van Nationals. That's pretty much what we're trying to do. So it's just about ready for the dyno, obviously, now with this stuff sorted. Unfortunately, the dyno is not ready for the car. The dyno computer finally kicked the bucket after all this time. It was on its last legs. We rode that for as long as we possibly could, but it's finally gone. So we've got the new computer in the cabinet. We're just waiting to hear back from Dyno Dynamics about upgrading our software to run on the new Windows 10 computer. And then the dyno will be ready for the car, and we can get it on there and get it tuned. So looking forward to that. Should be good. Righto, so just decided to put it back in the hoist bay just to get it out of the way until the dyno is ready for the car for now. And yeehaw, we've got another crack in the radiator on the other side.
So it's like that's a circle, like
circle.
But when I was saying, it looks like it was a pin, or I don't know. It's very weird. Sorry, hit the camera.
Just punch all my
Just
stuff.
punch it.
So yeah, we've got another crack in the radiator to weld up. So with this up on the hoist, looking at the bottom of this radiator, you can see it's got these two pins, one at each end of the tank. And it really looks like what's happened at the top is it must have had these pins on the top tank as well, and I think they've been like, you know, cut and ground back maybe. But it appears to be...
No, that is what happened.
Yeah,
exactly.
like these two spots at the top tank are exactly where it's cracked on the top. So yeah, it's what it looks like has happened, which is a bit, I don't know, it's a bit weird. I don't know why they have those on the top.
Well, why would it have it in the top tank?
Anyway. Anywho.
It's sort of weird, like, why does it have them at all? It seems like this radiator wasn't originally made for a H series. It was,
yeah, potentially not.
It was for something else, and then it's been adapted because the fabricator, like, he's welded brackets on the sides to actually bolt it to the
nose cone.
To the nose cone. So there's yeah, it was made to fit from something else.
Could be, yeah.
But yeah, that's where those cracks come from, which makes a bit more sense now.
Yeah, well, just another weld up to do, but it's getting there.
So I'll replace this other fuel line, and I'll replace this fuel line.
Hopefully by then the dyno's ready for it.
Yeah, that's the join there.
Righto, boys and girls, so the big van's coming along, a bit more progress on it. Our idea with our speed sensor has worked, fortunately enough. Our cherry sensor got here in time. We've set it up on the tail shaft unit and it's actually working. We just have to calibrate it when it goes on the dyno, so it's awesome that has worked. Rex got the other side of the radiator welded up, and then the thermostat housing actually was leaking water as well after that, so Rex spent today sorting out the thermostat housing as well, welding that up. Yeah, there's been so much gone into this that it's just ridiculous that I've have even forgotten. So yeah, it's wild, but unfortunately the worst for the dyno, it's not going to be back online until next week, which is the week of Van Nationals, which the owner is trying to get it to. So hopefully, fingers crossed, dyno's back online on Monday. We can get this thing run in Monday, sorted out, tuned Tuesday, Wednesday on E85, and the owner will pretty much be coming up to get it and taking it straight down to Van Nationals. So yeah, it's going to be tight, but it's just the way things go. Obviously, wasn't expecting it to have to take this much work to get it to where it is. So yeah, a few things working against us there. But anyway, it's a sick car. Looking forward to getting it sorted. Hopefully see it at Van Nationals. That'd be sick. All right, guys, big Van Boss. Van. So, our dyno is still offline. It's currently Monday. Now Dyno Dynamics are saying Wednesday. So very, very much frustrating. We've got so many cars here that need dynoing that we need to dyno to get finished and get paid for. So very, very frustrating. But this thing's got to try and get to Van Nationals next weekend, or this weekend coming, I should say. So lucky for us, tomorrow is actually Anzac Day. And Big Hoff there at Nugget Garage, Cleveland Dyno now. He has let us use his hub dyno to get this thing tuned tomorrow, so that we can get it tuned for one. It'll be good to tune it on a hub anyway, given the sort of the caliber of car it is and how much power we expect it to make. Be a lot more controlled and safe on a hub dyno, so looking forward to that. At this stage, I have very badly hurt my ankle yesterday afternoon. So I am probably going to have to go get x-rays and a few other things tomorrow, hopefully, if the hospital will allow me to tomorrow. So it looks like at this stage it may just be Rex heading down on his own without me. So I'll leave the camera with Rex. I'll see if Hoff can maybe film a little bit for us, but my apologies, guys, if it gets missed or if it doesn't happen. It is just what it is, unfortunately. So hopefully my ankle's not broken, fingers crossed, and we'll see how that goes. But just here getting last minute prep. Unfortunately, without our dyno to even do the run-in or anything, we're sort of hoping that everything goes well, that we don't have any issues. That's all we can do. Unfortunately, we can't run it up prior to it leaving. So yeah, we'll chuck it on the trailer it down to Hoff's, and fingers crossed all goes well and there is no issues tomorrow. So, as we know, that's usually not what happens with dyno tunes. So, we're being very hopeful. So that's our little speed sensor setup, you can see. Yeah. Righto, boys and girls, so here we are with the van. Probably not where you'd want to be at the moment, where it was already a push to get it tuned. We didn't have a dyno, and it's got to go to New South Wales van titles for this weekend. Gets picked up, well, it's meant to be getting picked up tomorrow. We're still obviously talking with the owner about what's going to happen. But anyway, Rex took it down to Cleveland Dyno there to Hoff at Nugget Garage, and he was kind enough to allow us to hire his hub dyno to get this thing tuned, which really got us out of this pinch as far as getting this thing sorted for van titles this weekend. Rex had a few problems on the day. Just a few issues with this thing not making power and a few other bits and bobs, but ended up getting most of it sorted out. Took E85 down there. We were all ready to go. He was all ready to go for the flex tune. I couldn't go. I had to go to the hospital because of my foot, which all turned out to be okay, so that was fine, but I couldn't go, unfortunately. Got it sorted. Rex ended up getting it tuned on 98 at 11.5 to 12 pound on the 98. Ended up making 730 at the hubs, and that was at 14, sorry, had 14 pound. Ended up making 730 at the hubs on 98. Pretty conservative timing, wasn't really leaning on it very hard at all. Was pretty happy with that, but already had a fuel pump. So obviously Rex didn't even bother with the E85 because we were out of fuel pump on the 98. So didn't make any sense to go E85. So did get a few runs. Rex got the boys there to film a few runs for us, or a run, I should say. And I'll put up the run here. And the pictures of the graphs and stuff, Rex had 3 closed loop boost control settings in the Haltech ready to go. You know, everything was sweet. One of the biggest issues we had though was obviously it was pretty obvious that this converter was flaring. Obviously, it is what it is. You guys know that was one of our concerns from the very beginning. The decision was made to run it and just see how it went. Anyway, Rex brought it home after that little tuning session, dumped the oil yesterday, and full of metal. Yeah, full of sparklers. So I'll put a picture here of what it looked like. Oh, it's still in the drum. I can show you now. It's probably easy to see on the picture what it looked like in the sun though, but yeah, not very nice. Rex cut the filter open and the filter was just full of metal. And like, not just your soft metal, there's a fair bit of copper in there. Like, copper is not good. That's underneath soft metal, you know, that's getting deep into a bearing shell. So obviously, given our concerns with the converter, Rex knew exactly where to start looking, and sure enough, the crank at this stage has got like a lot of end flow, like 15 thou or something. A lot more than it was when it left here, the engine. So yeah, this converter, whether it's this converter or it's actually the pressure circuit in the box, we don't know yet. At this stage, obviously, to start with, the converter's got to go. We don't know about the box, how it was built, and what the line pressure is, but Rex reckons there should be a way that we can actually get a pressure sensor in that circuit, which means that once it's sorted and we can get it back and get the tune finished off properly, we can actually put a pressure sensor in that and log it, so that we can keep an eye on what the actual circuit pressure is for that line circuit, and make sure it's not the actual box building line pressure and pushing on the back of the crank, and it is just the converter being super unhappy and ballooning and pushing the back of the crank in. But either way, the thrust bearing's cooked. So again, like I said, we knew that this was going to be questionable. Unfortunately, this is what it is. So obviously minimizing damage. It hasn't been run for very long, just that quick tune session, then trailered back home. So we're pulling the engine out at the moment. Got to flip it over, basically pull the crank out. We'll make the decision as we pull it down, basically as to how far we're going to pull it down. And the plan is to re-bearing it. All new mains, put a new thrust bearing in it, see what the rod bearings are like. They need to be replaced, we'll replace them. Basically, yeah, just minimizing damage, replacing whatever is damaged. Now, we're going to try and get it back together, back in the car and back running, so that the owner can still make it to van titles this weekend. But he is just going to have to baby this thing. It's going to have to be babied, off boost, strictly no on boost driving. If he wants this engine to survive, basically, with this converter in it. It's not happy at all. So that's going to be the deal. Try and get it re-bearing and back in, so that he can make van titles this weekend, and basically he needs to sort out a better converter situation, and then we need to get it back Obviously there's a few other things that are going to need to be seen to, which we found through the tune, the fuel pumps being one of them, so it needs more fuel pump. There's a few other things. As you have seen through this video, there's been quite a few things that we found through the time that it's been here, which it was never meant to be such a big stint. It was meant to basically be ready for running and tune, which it's just a car, and that's never the case. It just is what it is, but there's a few things we'll get Brock to sort out before it ends up back here, hopefully with enough fuel pump and the right converter and everything so that we can actually see what it'll do on E85. But really good numbers for a fairly conservative tune on 98 for what the combo is. Obviously we're very happy to push this engine a lot harder, provided there's not a converter ballooning the crank into oblivion. So anyway, that's where we're at with it. That's the current situation. I'm not going to film much of what's going on here because we just explained it all and it's nothing new that I haven't seen. But yeah, we'll try and get this back together and back in the car so that it's running and driving for New South Wales van state titles. Anyway, the gearbox is built by Hughes, which is a pretty reputable builder of gearboxes, so we should be able to just have a chat to them about this specific box. The owner obviously knows what it is, what it was built for, and how it built, and it's been in the car since it was obviously aspirated LS3, but at that point the converter was 4000 converter. Again, it's just, yeah, it's one of those things. Righto guys, so this is where we're at with it. Got it, for the most part, mostly sort of stripped. You know, pretty much all that's left is pull the heads off, rods and pistons out and crank out, so we're getting down to the nitty-gritty of finding out what's going on. Now, as we expected, we caught this fast enough that none of this bearing material had actually done any other damage to anything else. The rod bearings that we've looked at all look sweet. You know, there's no other damage, there's no damage to the cam lobes or anything like that. Everything else looks fine. So there's been a few issues that we found that were sort of out of our control, and a few issues that we found that we've talked to manufacturers about, and cleared a few things up. And there's a few setup changes that we would like to make to this engine. Nothing major, just small stuff really, but we've got down to getting this thrust out, and you can see the damage that it's done to the thrust. Just cooked it. That's how quick it happens. That's how fast this sort of issue can just eat away at these thrust bearings. So it is common for like really high horsepower rated gearboxes and stuff to go to Torrington thrust bearings, which is a full 360-degree thrust bearing, which gets machined into the front of the crank and the front journal to try and relieve the factory thrust bearing for this exact issue. However, given that this gearbox is only, I think, rated for 850 or something by Hughes, the line pressure in the box isn't meant to be this big of an issue, and this is very much what we believe to be this converter being the problem, which is what we thought from the start. But unfortunately, this main, the thrust main, is going to need to be linished. There is a bit of a mark in it which we wouldn't feel comfortable leaving, but we have also found this. I don't know if the GoPro's even going to pick it up actually. I really don't know if you'll be able to see it on the camera, but in the thrust face on the crank there is what definitely looks and appears to be a crack forming. This is most likely due to heat of what was going on. Now, you'd send the crank away and get it fluxed, and should be able to tell you a bit more, or x-rayed, and it should be able to tell us a bit more about how deep or how far that crack has done damage to. Me and Rex talked about it. If it was our engine, we'd be able to run that crank. We wouldn't have a problem running that crank in one of our engines, which is probably what will end up happening with it, to be honest. Or if we were, you know, pulling this down to put a Torrington thrust on it, you probably wouldn't be too worried about it. But for what this engine is and what we want to do with it, well, you know, at this point, the cheapest way that we can get out of it and have it safe and know that it's going to be right is to just basically replace this crank. So it's just a GM LSA factory forged crank. They're not a huge dollar item, and at this stage it'd just be new crank and a rebalance, and that's what we'll be looking at, which is the cheapest way to get out of this issue that we're in at the moment. But there's a pretty good indication for you of exactly how fast this can do this sort of damage. It's like not even been run long enough to really damage any rod bearings, but that's how fast it'll damage your crank and damage your thrust. So yeah, it's a serious problem. So it is frustrating for us, you know, the fact that we were already concerned about this, but it's always this situation. It's always the same old story when we're in a rush to meet deadlines, in a rush to get the car to a certain deadline, and the car ends up being far more work than it was supposed to be, and we end up having to basically try and complete a lot more work than we were supposed to in a lot shorter time, and rush to get things done and run parts and stuff that we weren't completely happy with. So it's a frustrating old tale, and it seems to always be the same thing when damage gets done. It's always in the same, what do you call it? Circumstances. It always seems to be in the same circumstances when we know that things aren't particularly right, but we're in a pinch, we're in a rush, things aren't working out, damage gets done. And that's just a product of the industry that we're in. So anyway, yes, cool. Anyway, at this point, like we said, no other damage has really been done, so it's the best we're going to get out of it at this stage is to do that and basically call van titles. So I'll give the customer a call and have a chat to him. But yeah, basically everything we're doing at the moment to try and get this into van titles is all temporary. And that means it's all just extra cost, and it's all nothing that we can guarantee. So like there's no way we can get the crank linished before to get it back together to get it to van titles, which means we'd have to run the crank the way it is, and there's no way we can't guarantee it's going to do more damage to another bearing and cause more metal in the engine, which is then going to in turn cause more damage to the rest of the engine. And there's also no way that we can, apart from making sure he literally babies it off boost, there's also no way that we can like ensure that this converter is not going to be a problem. So, and we'd like to just call it now, where we're at, fix this properly the way it should be fixed, get a converter sorted while we're going, and put this all together properly with the parts it should have, so that we can, you know, sort it out properly, and we know when it leaves here it's not going to be any further issues. Because at the moment everything we're doing is just a temporary band-aid fix to get it to an event. Yeah, so that's where we're at with it. It is what it is. It's unfortunate that he's not going to make this event, but it's not worth risking more damage, I don't think, and more cost. I mean, at the end of the day, we did try our best to get in there. Righto guys, yep. So I talked to the owner, and yeah, he's pretty good. He obviously understands what the go is, and understands that it's not worth any further damage, risking any further damage from band-aids fixes to just rush things. So we're going to order a converter from our converter people, built to the correct specs that we want for this setup. We'll get this crank to the machine shop, get it linished, get it flux tested and see what they reckon. We're going to do a valve spring change as well as a retainer change as well as the lock change. New set of push rods, fix these studs in the intake, put it all back together, and then we should be dandy with a new converter that's actually sorted and suited. So yeehaw, further down it goes, get everything where it's got to go, all the moving parts happening to get this thing sorted out properly, and yeah, not have any further issues. Anyway guys, I think that'll do us for an episode on this thing. It's been a fair bit going on. I'll talk to the owner. I didn't actually run it by him when I talked to him before, but we'll talk to him about getting this fuel pump issue sorted as well, just so that when it all goes back together it can just get finished. So we'll talk about that as well. But yeah, so there's going to be another episode on obviously all this getting put back together and finished off properly. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on that one. It is a really nice car. Don't forget to go and get your votes in for Brock for his Young Street Machine of the Year. He is in the running with his van. So he has entered that, and it'd mean a lot to all of us if you could go and vote for him. Hopefully he can take out Street Machine of the Year, Young Street Machine of the Year this year, and get a feature on the big van in Street Machine. So that'll be wicked. Anyway guys, thanks for watching as always. We'll see you on the next one. Peace out, see you, bye.